Aldous Huxley was an English writer and philosopher. He wrote nearly 50 books. And here's his quote about history. That men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons of history. Welcome to the History Slices podcast, a mother-son duo discussing awesome bits of history. We prove on every show that history is not boring, entertaining, yet stimulating. This is History Slices. And now, here's your hosts, Jacob and Rachel.
Well, hey, Jacob.
Hey, Mom.
Oh my gosh, it's been so long. We're finally back in business.
Yes, we had some technical issues, so we had to send in the Roadcaster, and it was a whole debacle. Luckily, we got it back. We're back in business.
Yes.
Ready to rock and roll.
And not to disparage the Roadcaster name, because we like our equipment, but there was an issue, and it did take a long time to get resolved. So even though we tried to prepare for the absence of the machine, it took way too long to get it back. So here we are. We're good to go.
Thank you for being patient with us. We're ready to jump right back into fun little slices of history.
Yes. Let's do it. And so today we're talking about Vincent Price.
Yes. One of my favorite actors. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of just, because normally on the show, when we talk about like a lot of conflict or advancement or whatever, but I want to talk a little bit more on the cultural side of things this time, because I thought that would be interesting.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. And unlike some of the people we've talked about in the past, like Vincent van Gogh, they've had like kind of traumatic pasts or whatever, or like some very exciting, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened.
Yeah.
Vincent Price was very blessed in the sense that he didn't really go through that, but I thought his influence was still interesting and notable enough to talk about.
That sounds great. And I'm glad to hear he didn't have some sort of trigger event or some horrible past he had to overcome or something. So that's good. I'm looking forward to learning about him, because I don't know anything. I mean, I recognize his name, but other than that, I don't really know anything about him.
Sure. He's got like if you've seen any of his movies, you'd recognize his face or his voice, as the case may be. So just going through his life, why not jump right in? He was born 1911 on May 27th in St. Louis in Missouri.
Okay. That was about the year that my grandma and grandpa were born.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah.
So his parents, he was actually Vincent Price Jr., though he's not really known by that. His dad was Vincent Leonard Price Sr., he was actually a president of the National Candy Company, which was like a confectionery.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. In the early 1900s. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. And his mom was named Margaret Cobb Price.
Cool.
Yeah, this is fun. He was the youngest of 4 siblings. He had 3 older siblings.
Okay.
And they weren't poor, obviously, because his dad was president of a candy company.
Yeah, pretty good job.
Yeah. But they weren't like super rich either. You know, they were kind of like upper middle class, kind of that area, that little sweet spot. Well, by 1933, he graduated from Yale. He had a degree in English and a minor in art history. You know, obviously skipping a bit there, but not a lot. There's not too much exciting stuff to happen.
He had the opportunity to go to a good school.
Yeah. Well,
and
like
being the fourth one too, that's good.
Yeah. Well, like I said, like they had some cast to I don't want to say throw at that, but spin there
to provide for that.
Mm-hmm. And so he kind of like bounced around a little bit before he got into acting, which is what he's most famous for and what he did for most of his life. He taught for a year. He entered into the I'm not sure how you say this name, Courtauld Institute of Art in London. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
I'm not familiar with that word either. So
yeah, I think it's someone's name. So his plan was that he would kind of get a master's degree in fine arts, but that didn't exactly pan out. He ended up switching his career goals and ended up entering the theater, which, to be fair, a lot of people kind of change up their plans and like,
of course, yeah,
later education and all that early on. So that's not too surprising in of itself.
Right. I agree.
Mm-hmm. So 1934, he first appeared on stage professionally. Before he was ever in film, he was in the theater, which is true for a number of kind of actors, I feel like, especially around this generation. I suppose.
Yeah. I don't want to get sidetracked, but this morning when I was doing my iFit workout with Graham McTavish, he was talking about how he also started on the stage and then went in front of a camera. and how he was talking about how much it taught him about being able to react, and it's a good trainer for acting.
Yeah, totally.
Being live,
though it's a bit different. Not to get too far off, but Laurence Olivier, he was originally a theater actor who became a film actor, and he initially had some trouble adjusting because it's a different format and a different kind of medium. Yeah. Honestly, it is.
Yeah.
But eventually he got really good at it, and he's like hailed as like one of the greatest actors ever. Yeah. But
so it's interesting to hear people who have started in theater and ended up in television or movies.
Yeah. While on stage, like early on, he ended up performing with Orson Welles' Mercury Theater as well. So there's kind of a fun little connection, another famous person there. And of course, Vincent wasn't really a name at that point. Well, it was, but you know what I mean? He wasn't Vincent Price. Yeah. A few years later, he married a former actress named Edith Barrett, probably. Yeah. And that was in like 1938. 2 years later, 1940, obviously, they had a son who he also named Vincent. So I guess Vincent III, I suppose,
I think
technically.
So.
And fun fact about this Vincent, he's still living to this day. He does a whole bunch of stuff. He's like a reporter, and he's written some poetry, and is like an activist for this or that. You know? So
cool.
it's kind of like
cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just thought, well, no, he had a couple of kids, which we'll get into.
Vincent Jr.?
Price.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The main guy we're talking about. Yeah. It's a little confusing. There's a lot of Vincent's, hopping around. It's all good. So when he's starting into films, he made his on-screen debut in 1938 in a French film, or at least it has a French name, Service Deluxe. I don't know. It wasn't really a big role, and it was kind of just like a background thing because he wasn't famous. It was just like we needed an extra. It wasn't until the 1944 film Laura, where he was opposite Jean Tierney, if that's how you even say the name, where he kind of became more of a, oh, it's that guy. People got a little more recognition. By 1939, he appeared in his first horror film, which is a genre he became basically synonymous with. Specifically, it was the film was Tower of London, which starred Boris Karloff. It's about Richard III and being his murderous self, even if historically he wasn't really all that murderous. It's just one of those blame Shakespeare. Well, really blame the Tudors. That's a whole nother thing. Don't worry about it. It's a fun story.
It is a fun story. Richard III, is he like in Robin Hood, like in the Disney Robin Hood story?
No, that was like Richard I,
the Lion-Hearted or something?
Yeah, that was Richard I.
Okay, all right.
But good question. So throughout like the rest of the 40s, basically from like 47 to 49, he went through like a period of being typecast as playing the villains in film noirs. Honestly, he played the villain in a lot of his films, which I've heard or read, I should say, that a lot of actors like playing the bad guys because they tend to have really good lines. And if it's a musical, really good numbers,
I can see how that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Just kind of be goofy or whatever. Yeah. But the film noirs, do you know what a film noir is?
I'm not really sure. To me, if I had to guess, it was something that's either very short or very new, like pushing boundaries or something. I'm right. Just guessing.
Sure. Well, basically it still is. It's still, I think, technically, though it's not as popular as it was back in the day. It's a genre of film, usually about detectives or criminal elements or whatever. Okay. And it's all very there's usually dark. like a dangerous woman, and then like a hard-boiled detective, and then like a police officer. It's just it's a genre. Okay. Basically.
Oh, that's good. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, but he was in The Web, The Law Knight, Rogue's Regiment, and The Bribe. So there's a lot
Those
of
were all the
film noirs that he played bad guy in, in the 40s. In 1948, Vincent and Edith, they had a divorce, which is unfortunate, but sometimes that happens. A year later, however, he married costume designer Mary Grant. So it wasn't that long of a single period, I guess. I don't know what you would call that. Well, by the 1950s, he ended up in more lead roles. He finally became kind of like center stage. He played the main character in The Baron of Arizona, where he played a famous comedian by the name of James Revis. I don't know.
So it wasn't a horror film, it was a comedy?
Yeah, which is kind of funny.
That is cool. That would be a fun role to play too, a comedian.
Mm-hmm. And that same year, and according to him, this is one of his favorite films that he's been in. He was in The Campaign for Caesar, where he played Burnbridge Waters. It's like his famous, one of his favorite roles, according to him. From around 1947 to 1951, he starred in The Saint, which was a radio show.
So what did you say? That was 3 or 4 years, did you say? I'm sorry.
47 to 51.
Okay, so 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
After that, he went full on into horror films, like nothing but horror films. He was in House of Wax in 1953.
I recognize that title.
Yeah, it's about a murderer who uses his victims as wax dummies in a museum.
Oh my gosh.
That's fun. It's also 1953, so it's probably a lot less ghastly.
This is like when the Twilight Zone was a popular show in the late 50s or early 60s, throughout the 60s.
It was around that time, I think. He was also in The Mad Magician, which really came out in 1954, which I looked at the plot. It's basically what it sounds like. It's a murderous magician dude.
Oh, gosh.
He was also in The Fly, which came out in 1958. He played the brother of a scientist who turns himself into a human fly hybrid by accident. I've actually seen that one. It was all right.
So he plays like the main bad guy?
No, well, he's not the villain in that one.
Okay.
That one was just science has gone wrong kind of a thing.
But the one before that, what was the one that you mentioned right before
that? The
Mad
Magician.
Was he the Mad Magician?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
He was also in the sequel to The Fly, Return of the Fly, which came out a year later in 1959.
Are those at all related to The Fly with Jeff
Goldblum?
Yeah.
That Jeff Goldblum Fly.
Yeah.
That's a remake of these ones.
Okay, that's where I was
from
going.
The 50s.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's the remake, which came out in the 80s, I believe, is a much more famous version. And a bit more ghastly, but then again, Cronenberg made that one, so that's probably why, because he loves gross out, like eyeballs popping out stuff.
Oh, gosh.
Also, another fun fact, House of Wax was the first 3D film to get in the top 10 box office of the year.
Oh, wow.
So that's cool.
That is cool.
There was not a lot of people know this unless you're into like film stuff. There was a brief like surge of 3D stuff in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, but it died out and then came back again in 2011, 2012.
Isn't that interesting? Because I do remember, if you picture, posters or advertisements and stuff like that, something that's relative to the 50s.
Yeah.
You always see like this black and white picture of this boy and a girl or whatever, people sitting in a movie theater with those 3D glasses on.
There's a famous photo of a famous black and white photo of a bunch of people in the movie theater with
that's probably
3D
what I'm
glasses
thinking of.
on.
Yeah.
And it's one of those like clickbaity, proof that time travel exists, or because it's older than you think.
Isn't that interesting?
It just
then it
lost
took
popularity for a while.
Yeah, probably because it really wasn't very good.
Yeah,
if you can imagine, sometimes you have to make sure you don't get queasy or something when you're watching 3D films. But back then, I imagine it was probably a little bit rougher on the eyes.
Well, I like that you mentioned that, because we're going to get soon into William Castle, who was all about that stuff, but we'll get into that.
Okay.
Before that, real briefly, he was also in the 10 Commandments, which I know you saw. He played the main builder dude, like the construction guy.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's been decades since I saw that movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it too, so I don't blame you. But he was in that.
Yeah.
So in the late 50s, he began appearing in a bunch of William Castle films. I'm assuming you don't know who William Castle is.
I don't.
Fair enough. He's not very all that well known now. Basically, he is most well known for his famous gimmicky horror films. Like, he was a showman, basically, and the films themselves are okay. They're all right. They weren't like anything to write home about. But he would have doctors present on standby in a theater in case someone had a heart attack.
Wow.
Obviously, no one did, but it was to kind of enhance this is a scary thing.
Watch out.
Yeah. There was a movie which Vincent Price was in, I believe, called The Tingler, which had this spine monster, this giant bug that would go on your spine and stuff.
Ew.
And he would have vibrating seats in the theater. So that what would happen is, because at one point during the film, the Tingler would escape into a movie theater, and then all the lights would go off in the theater, and William Castle or whoever call announcements is like, oh, watch out, it's here. And then the seats will start vibrating. It's like, if you feel it, the only way to get to release is to scream. And
oh
it would
my
all,
gosh.
you know. So he was a bit of a goof.
How did that go over? Did audiences like that?
Oh yeah, for a while. I mean, it's all gimmicks.
Yeah, it's all new too. So, gosh, I remember.
I think it was one of those like among the audience he was going for, they liked it, but I think it was kind of a niche thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of when we were in Busch Gardens.
Yeah,
and we saw that 4D
like
L.L. Stein, J.L. Stein,
I
J.
can't
Stein,
remember.
some sort of
R.L. Stein.
R.L. Stein, yeah.
With the lighthouse.
Horror, yeah. And that had things happening with the seats and
air blowing and stuff. Yeah.
So that guy Castle was kind of.
He was kind of a pioneer in that sense. He a couple other stuff he did, and we'll get back to Price. That Price is in a lot of these. He had a coward's corner. It's basically what that was that like it's like if it's too frightening, just follow the signs to the coward's corner. And the signs would have like right this way, coward.
Oh my gosh.
Like really.
That might have been me in a couple movies I've seen before. I just wanted to leave the theater, but I was too afraid.
They're all kind of dumb stuff, but it's a fun kind of dumb stuff.
Yeah, that's so funny.
The Mass of Sardonicus, which was another one I've seen most of. I've seen most of the Tingler as well, but the Mass of Sardonicus was like had two endings. Allegedly, it had two endings where it's like the audience could vote on like these papers as to like has a bad guy been like redeemed enough? Has he suffered enough? Should he have the good ending, or is he just an outright jerk and deserves a bad ending? But because it was filmed during the Hays Code, I believe, which was you weren't really allowed to give criminals unpunished by the end of the film.
Oh, I didn't realize that was a thing.
In some way. Yeah. So it was one of those things that like, and the fact that he claimed there was two endings filmed, we only know of the bad one. So there's a question of, was there ever really?
It was just a little bit of a gimmick, maybe just to make people feel like they were involved.
Yeah, something like that. But it was a funny little interaction thing.
That's cool.
Yeah. So anyways,
I think I kind of like that guy just because he was doing things differently.
Yeah. So again, like I mentioned, he's in the Tingler. He was like the scientist dude. He was also in House on Haunted Hill, which came out in 1959 as well.
That sounds spooky.
Yeah, well, it sounds generic, honestly.
That's true. It sounds kind of like a Hardy Boy title.
Yeah. So from Goosebumps or whatever. So after like that, during the 60s, he began working with Roger Corman, who was another kind of famous schlocky horror movie director from the time. And you're asking, who's Roger Corman? Roger Corman. He's still, first of all, he's still living. He's still making movies. He's 95 years old.
Wow.
A lot of his movies are really schlocky and cheesy, like giant shark versus mega octopus or what,
But the fact that he's still making means that there's some demand for that, I guess.
So throughout a number of his films in the 60s, Vincent Price played the bad guy or the lead role or whatever. He was a major role in that with his very distinctive voice. And that includes he was in House of Usher, 1960, The Pin and the Pendulum, 1961, Tales of Terror, 1962, The Comedy of Terrors, 1963, The Raven, also 1963, The Mask of Red Death, 1964, and The Tomb of Ligeia, also from 1964. Obviously,
my gosh, so busy.
Yeah, Corman had a thing for Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I recognize a few of those titles.
But no, Vincent Price is in so many films. I had to cut out some of the stuff he was in because it's like, this is turning to a list.
He just worked a lot.
He was very prolific. I think it was easy for him to find roles in certain types because he had a certain look about him that was very dignified, but also could be very easily like a sinister vibe.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he got typecast a lot as like the bad guy. And he also had a very distinctive voice. I'm not good with impressions.
Okay. Since you say you're not good at doing impressions, here's a quick clip of Vincent Price performing The Raven.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping, rapping at my chamber door.
Keep in mind also, like, those Edgar Allan Poe movies weren't the most accurate to the source material. It was kind of just like vague, loose, like, here's a fun idea to kind of go off this.
Gosh, I can imagine this could potentially be very spooky though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm forgetting the title now. The one where the heartbeat is
The Telltale Heart.
Telltale Heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that would be so spooky.
Yeah, no, that was spooky when the
Just
original
the story,
was
yeah.
spooky to me.
You don't even need to put it visual
Yeah.
to that.
So I've actually, of those films, I haven't seen too much. I own Pin and Pendulum, which I haven't seen yet somewhere. I also own and I've seen House of Usher, which was okay. It kind of took a lot of the more ambiguity out of the original story, which I guess, easier for audience goers, I suppose. And I've seen the first half of The Mask of Red Death, which really took out the moral ambiguity. Like, it's just like, this person's a monster.
Wow.
It's all good. It's made for thrills and chills, so it isn't like necessarily trying to be accurate.
Yeah. So it accomplished what it was going for.
Yeah. Like, Corman, I don't think is trying to, I don't think he tries to tell good stories. I think he tries to entertain, kind of like William Castle, which you can argue there's value in that, not meant to win Oscars or anything. So he finally, by 1960, he got his Hollywood Walk of Fame star, in Hollywood.
You had to work hard for that.
Television and motion picture. Yeah. 1962, he had his second kid, a daughter named Victoria, which is basically the female version of Vincent. I don't know what it is. They love that name. Today, he's still living, of course. And, well, I should say of course, because who knows. But she's still living. She's a writer and a public speaker about this or that. I didn't look too much into her because I was focused more on her dad.
Yeah,
but I thought, it's cool. She's still around.
62. Interesting.
Yeah. He also guest starred in a lot of television around this time. He was in Batman, like the 1960s. Adam West, really cheesy, goofy Batman.
Yeah.
He played the villainous Egghead.
Oh, gosh.
Which basically was bald him, and he was supposed to be this criminal mastermind, but he's called Egghead because he was bald and gimmicky.
Oh, that's really funny.
And he was also in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is another famous kind of like espionage show from that time, and the Red Skelton show as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know when I was looking for some pictures of him to post on Facebook or whatever, I saw a picture of him with Kermit the Frog. Yeah. So, he must have had at least one stint on Sesame Street.
I mean, a lot of people did.
Oh, that's true.
Alice Cooper's been on Sesame Street.
They did. They always had some celebrity on there talking to Kermit or something. Yeah, that's true.
But no, he got around. He was like a very famous face by this point. He also, this is kind of a side note, it's not really too big in terms of like a lot of his other stuff. He also started publishing books on gourmet cooking because he was apparently really into gourmet cooking.
Oh, that's cool. So he got to the point where he could do some things he loved, like cook, and that's cool.
I think he did love being an actor, but he also really was into cooking.
Yeah,
so.
probably. I imagine he probably did love being an actor. He did it for so long.
Mm-hmm. So he continued acting throughout the 1970s and 1980s. He also did some dramatic readings of Poe. Because, again, horror icon. His voice fit really well with that. Poe being like a horror icon, and he had a voice that really fit well with that and all that. So
it's like a perfect match.
It's a good match, yeah. And he was a fan of Poe too, which isn't too surprising because the same kind of genre they're in, if you will. He also, I think this is interesting, provided vocals for musicians such as Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper had a 1975 song called The Black Widow, which the music video, which I saw years ago, and while doing research for this, I refound, is basically has like an introduction, because it's all part of Alice Cooper's, I think it's Welcome to My Nightmare concept album. Okay. Which basically is like a storyline, if you will. But in the music video, Vincent Price is like this sinister owner of a museum all about spiders. And he's talking all about different venomous, deadly spiders and stuff. And then he starts ranting about how, like, spiders will take over the earth or whatever. Wow. It's fun. It's goofy.
Pretty creative use of Vincent Price. So
yeah. He also did vocals for Michael Jackson as well in the 1983 song Thriller.
I was guessing.
Yeah, he does the narration for that.
That's cool. So if you're familiar with that song,
that's what he sounds like. Yeah. He also had, this is kind of more stuff that I've known about since I was a kid, because it's for kids. He had a major role in the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, which was a special that came out in the mid 80s, 85
Wow.
or so.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
Yeah. Well, needless to say, if you don't know his face, you probably know his voice.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah.
just because it's that iconic. Unfortunately, in 1973, he underwent another divorce. I guess he's just had some trouble with that. But a year later, he married.
A year later.
Yeah. Carol Brown, who was an Australian actress.
Okay. He doesn't like to be alone, I guess.
I guess, yeah. Or he just gets over it quickly. I don't know. Well, that marriage lasted until 1991 when Carol passed away. So there wasn't, like, that one stuck. And interestingly enough, one of his personal favorite roles was also one of his last roles, which was the villain Professor Rattigan in Disney's The Great Mouse Detective.
Oh,
This came
that's
out
interesting.
1986.
I know I've seen that before, but
Yeah, the bad guy, the big rat dude.
yeah, Ratigan.
Yeah, he voices that, and he apparently really liked it because it was very over the top and hammy and stuff,
Cool.
I'm sure. He also sings in it, which is awesome.
Wow.
Because I don't know how often he sang. So
Yeah, so
that
I
was
got a
cool.
chance to sing. So let's see, that was in what year again, did you say?
1986. It wasn't his last role, but it was one of his last roles.
He's like 75, 70
Yeah, no,
something.
he acted till like the very end, basically. His last major role, because I think he had like a couple cameos or whatever beyond that. His last major role was as the inventor in the 1990 Tim Burton film Edward Scissorhands, which, if you don't know, is basically Tim Burton's take on Frankenstein, basically.
I did see that movie.
Yeah, but he's the inventor in that.
That's really something. That was his last big one, huh?
Yeah, it also helped launch Johnny Depp's career.
Yeah.
Who he's a bit of a, I guess, controversial is the right word for it. He's a bit of a controversial figure, but he's a good actor, I
Depp
think.
is?
Yeah.
Do you think he's controversial? He always seems to choose unusual films.
Well, nowadays he's a bit controversial, I guess.
Oh.
He said some stuff or whatever.
Oh.
But, you know,
I'm not up on that.
whatever.
So
That's fine. I don't
he
blame
was
you.
in early, I think before that,
He was in
like me.
21 Jump Street.
he was, yeah, on TV. But also What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I thought that came out
Oh,
before
maybe. I don't
Edward
know.
Scissorhands. But
Basically, not turns into a thing about Johnny Depp, but basically he was in 21 Jump Street and didn't want to get typecast as like a teen heartthrob.
yeah.
So he took Edward Scissorhands as like a really weird out there role and kind of solidified him as a really weird out there
Yeah.
actor.
Yeah.
Which, you know, fair enough. Yeah. So
I
I
have to
want
see that ball set in motion.
Yeah. So Vincent Price, I love Vincent Price as not only just an actor with an amazing talent to like play likable yet despicable characters, you know, or one or the other or both, as the case may be. I also like him as a person. Like, reading up on him was really interesting, really fascinating. You know, he throughout his life, like even before this was like a kind of more popular stance to take, I guess, publicly, he was very much against like prejudice. You know, he was an outspoken, like, did not like racism, did not like religious division, you know. And his daughter, Victoria, she came out as lesbian at one point, and he was very supportive of her, and very, like, he didn't disown her or, you know, throw her out or anything like that. So in that sense, he was a pretty progressive person.
Mm-hmm.
At least how I would define progressive, I guess, which I think is awesome, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's always hard to stand up for what you believe in when you are in the minority.
Sure. No, totally. I get that. Sometimes with these older figures in history, not that he's too far back, you know, he passed away in the early 90s. So
Yeah. And she's not that much older than I am. I mean,
yeah. But it's, you know, like when you go back and look at like how older people had a full life in them, you know, sometimes they're pretty cool, you know, and you're like, oh, that's really neat. They said some cool stuff. They did some cool stuff. But then you find out they hate Jewish people or something dumb like that.
Some hidden.
Yeah,
something.
or not even hidden. It's just like, oh, yeah, well, you know, people were more bigoted back then, or more like closed-minded on some certain things. Like George Patton is like that, for example. But it was refreshing for me, kind of just reading up on him, to find out that he wasn't that bigoted, at least not in public, maybe in private, who knows who you are in private. But I thought, oh, that's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah, that is cool.
So as an actor and like a person, going off those who are close to him, because obviously he was a social, outgoing guy. He was very charming, you know, he was very friendly. And
he wasn't scary.
He wasn't scary.
In real life.
No, he played a lot of scary people because he rocked playing the bad guy, which is why he was typecast as it, because he had the looks, he had the voice, and I don't think he minded too much about being that role, which is good because sometimes the typecasting, it kind of sucks. Like Bela Lugosi, he did not want to be Dracula forever, but because he was so amazing as Dracula, he couldn't get out of being Dracula.
Yeah, it could be a curse, a blessing or a curse.
Sure, yeah. Anyways, both him and Mary Grant, who was his second wife, in case there's a lot of names thrown around, easy to get them confused. They donated a lot of artwork and cast to the East Los Angeles College, which is where today the Vincent Price Art Museum is. And it was built in like in the late 50s or so.
Oh, that's really
it's
cool.
Been around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he finally passed away October 25th, 1993 in his LA home. He had lung cancer, which sucks, but he was older.
It did. I saw some pictures of him smoking too, and I wondered if that ended up being what got him.
It was more common back then, but yeah,
sure,
it's unfortunate. He was 82, so pretty respectable. And he, to this day, is widely admired by tons of people, including like those you wouldn't necessarily think would be on the same side on some stuff. A lot of horror film aficionados, I think is the right term. They really like him because he's kind of this iconic presence. He's still popular. He's a little less now, of course, because he's been dead for a while. But, people know who he is. When you say Vincent Price, chances are it's like, oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's at least some recognition, name recognition.
There's a lot of parodies of him and references to him and like on his iconic voice and stuff. Like The Simpsons did some stuff with him with their Treehouse of Terror or Treehouse of Horror. Their Halloween specials will sometimes reference Vincent Price.
You just made me think of something. I wonder if he's on that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
When I was a kid, we had a record, LP for Halloween, scary noises and stuff.
Oh, yeah?
I'm trying to remember if there was, I think that there was somebody's voice on there. I just wonder if he did something like that. I'll have to look into that later.
Sure. So, that's why I want to cover him basically because I thought he was really interesting and really like kind of a cool figure. And I thought he's relevant at least to like kind of culture and stuff, even if it's still a little more recent than some of the other stuff we talked about.
It's very cool. Influential guy in a certain area of really a genre in film and, like you said, radio and stuff. That's really, really cool to hear about that guy. I like that he was active so much of his life working. That's cool.
Yeah, well, some of like my favorite actors haven't been in a lot of stuff, unfortunately.
So if you like Vincent Price, you're not gonna have to try too hard to find stuff he's in.
You won't be disappointed. You're not gonna run out of stuff.
Yeah, cool. That's great, Jacob. So nice job on this one. It's so
thank you.
I'm happy to be back, having being able to produce podcasts again. So I think this is a great comeback. And who are we going to be talking to, or what are we going to be talking about next time?
Right. So next time we're talking about an event, and this is going to be more kind of traditional in the sense of what we've talked about. Going to talk about the Great Molasses Flood of 1919.
The Great Molasses Flood. I don't know how you find these things. The Emu War, the Polish Bear, and the Polish Army Bear. Molasses flood. Okay, I'd never heard of such a thing, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about that for sure.
Awesome. Great.
All right, Jacob. Until next time, listeners, thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for your patience while we waited for our equipment to return, and we hope you get to tune in next time.
Bye.
Confucius once said, "Study the past if you would define the future." You've been listening to the History Slices podcast with Jacob and Rachel. We hope you've gotten some useful information from the show. We hope we made you think, and we hope you were entertained. We know we had fun, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook at History Slices and on Instagram at History Slices Podcast. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show, and tell a friend about the show. That'll help us out too. One more quote before we go from Michael Crichton. If you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know it's part of a tree. Till next time, this is History Slices, signing off.